Hello everyone, my name is Cornelius Nomeshi. I'm a medical doctor from Ghana. I completed my MPA degree at the Harvard THM School of Public Health this past summer. Last year, during my application process, I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Banda Khalifa, who is a friend and a senior colleague. Dr. Banda's knowledge and experience of the graduate application process made it easier to write an outstanding personal statement, also aim for the right test course and finding the right people to write recommendation letters for me. He also gave me a really good insight about the funding landscape available for me for my education. I was able to get admission into most of the top schools that I applied for, including Johns Hopkins, Columbia University, Boston University, and then Harvard University. Yeah, so if you are actually looking to advance your studies and you're looking for a good and friendly coach, I would recommend no other person.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our highly anticipated event today. Unlock your PhD potential with Professor Dowdy, who is a vice dean here at the Bloomberg School. As usual, I'm your host, Dr. Banda Khalifa, and I'm thrilled to have you all join us today as we explore the ins and outs of the PhD application process. Today, as I initially said, we are incredibly fortunate to have Professor Dowdy, who's a distinguished professor and a vice dean of education at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Professor Dowdy brings years of experience and knowledge, making this a truly exceptional opportunity for all aspiring candidates. During our time today, we'll delve into the strategies for crafting a successful application and navigating the admission landscape, especially also talking about rejections, because I've gotten a lot of messages about rejections and how to deal with those. And then we'll address some of your burning questions as time goes by. Without wasting much time, I would like to invite Professor Dowdy to the event. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Not sure whether I can hear you. Maybe your mic is.
Let's try a different one.
Yeah, I think it's yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, good morning again. Nice to have you. I know I've been discussing with you for a while, and you are a busy man, so we are lucky to have you today.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. So, I mean, before to start things off, could you please share a little about your own academic journey and what has inspired you to pursue like career in public health and academia?
Yeah, sure. So, so I started out as an undergraduate, thinking that I was going to be involved with basic science, but came to to the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins as a master's student in epidemiology.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there joined the PhD program and also the MD program and ever since have been working in the field of public health. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
Great, great. Um, so I mean, like I've had several questions over the past couple of weeks with regards to what admission committees are looking for. In your own experience, what would you say are some of the key factors that make a PhD application stand out to the admissions committee?
yeah. So I mean, I think the first thing to recognize, I think people often feel like what's happening behind the scenes is that people are like counting publications or GPA points or things like that, and
Mm-hmm.
that um, we're selecting people because they have a 3.95 GPA as opposed to a 3.93 or honestly even a 3.8 or sometimes 3.7, 3.6, or that someone has 7 publications instead of 5, and that there's some like matrix behind it all of of trying to give quantitative score points for this, and that's not what's happening at all. Um, what's happening is that in any application period,
Mm-hmm.
you have about 30 in our case, I would say, and this is from the Department of Epidemiology at Johns Hopkins, 30 to 40 applications that really stand out as being above the rest. And again,
Mm-hmm.
this is holistically speaking, and it doesn't mean that any of those are perfect, but it means that this is someone that we think would be um, very good. um,
Okay.
and beyond that, I mean, we're looking out of those 30 to 40 to admit in a given year in our department, it's about 12, right? And so getting from those 30 to 12 is not a question of who has the slightly higher GPA or the slightly more number of publications. It's thinking about how that person would fit with our faculty here at Johns Hopkins. So looking for um, does this person match with the research interests of specific faculty that we think we are good at, and that maybe people who need additional advisees.
Mm-hmm.
Does this person give a compelling story about where they're going to go? Do we see this person as being a future leader in the field? How does this person contribute to the overall diversity of the class? Do we have too many other people who are kind of from similar backgrounds as that person? Um, does this person's personal statement read as if they're going to be someone that people want to work with as opposed to not? um, and uh, and does this person seem to have a background that demonstrates a commitment to public health? So if there's someone who's been working in the field for 5 7 years, right? That counts for a lot for us because we feel like this is someone who has demonstrated that they really are committed to public health, as opposed to someone who's coming straight out of undergraduate, for example. We might say, well, we don't know yet if this person is certainly going to stay in the field, and so that would be again, even with the highest level of potential, they might be at a bit of a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that sheds light on so many misconceptions about the process. People usually feel, I mean, those who reach out to me after they've not been successful often talks about probably it's because maybe they don't have publications or because their GPAs are low. Somebody even asked me if I my GPA is in a first class range because he doesn't understand why he couldn't get into the program. So it takes more than just your GPA, as you said, for you to demonstrate that you are a good fit for the program. Um, in assessing students, how crucial is the person's alignment between their research interest and the department's focus in admission process?
Yeah, so and I also want to I mean I don't want to say that things like publications and GPA are unimportant,
Mm-hmm.
but I also don't want to make people think that again we're parsing point zero 0.01 points out of GPA or one single publication, things like that. I do think that the match between a student's interest and the faculty is important, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be a perfect one-to-one match. So if if we can see that this is where a student is coming from and what they're wanting to do, and we feel like we would be in a good position to help train that student, I think that we would be enthusiastic in general about that
Mm-hmm.
student. Again, it doesn't have to be, well, we have a faculty member who is specifically looking at um, measuring stigma among men who have sex with men and transgender women and HIV, and so we need someone who's doing exactly that.
Exactly. Okay.
Um, but rather we want to see students who have their own vision and think about how that could align with what our faculty do. But it doesn't have to be a again kind of a perfect
Perfect
match.
match. Okay. Okay. I just to chip this in, I realized that some programs, some PhD programs, really emphasize on identifying an advisor before you even apply to the program. How is the process at Hopkins different from others?
Well, so and this is something where I think as a potential applicant, it's important to try and get a gauge on this from each institution because it's very different from one institution to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you're applying to an institution where they really strongly value identifying an advisor ahead of time, it's important to do that, and it's important to reach out to those people, and it's important to say, "Hey, would you be interested and willing to take PhD students?" Um, but there are other institutions, and Hopkins is one of them, where we're not looking for an advisor to be identified ahead of time,
Okay.
and the reason for this is that every PhD class we are having to figure out how we're going to provide a funding package for each PhD student,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that discussion depends on linking different training grants to different students, different scholarships to different students, and then finding which students we would need to support just purely out of departmental funds. And so if a student comes in being too strongly linked to an advisor, that actually reduces our flexibility in creating those funding packages for other
Mm-hmm.
students. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's helpful for us to have a sense of the students' interests and where they might align, but without saying I must work with this particular advisor up front. And so I think that, but every institution is different and different in the way that they fund their students. Some of them really want you to identify that advisor up front because they want to ask that advisor to help chip in for the funding. So it's useful, especially if there are a small number of schools that are on your highest priority list to talk to the people who are administering those programs.
Mm-hmm.
So because again, if you're at a school like Hopkins where it really doesn't matter that you have pre-selected an advisor, then faculty can actually get a little bit annoyed from hearing all of these requests from students. So will you take me as an advisee next year, right? Because we get a
Yeah.
lot of these every single year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at an institution where those connections have to be made before the application process is over, then you want to hear from those people because you
Yes.
want to be
Yeah.
identifying people
Mm-hmm.
in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it
Yeah.
varies.
That makes sense. That makes sense because oftentimes students say, "Oh, they've reached out to multiple faculty at Hopkins and they didn't get any response." Does that mean that they would likely not get in? Um, so it's good that you've given us that clarification. In evaluating uh, applicants, what would you say are some of the common mistakes that stands out in and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, well, so to me, I think the number one mistake that is avoidable is writing a personal statement that comes off as being arrogant, right? So if I read these personal statements and it reads to me like this person just thinks they are absolutely incredible and have nothing more to learn, right? I'm thinking this is not someone that I would want to work with, and in
Mm-hmm.
fact, I worry that if we bring this sort of person into our PhD class, that they're going to poison the entire. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important for us that our PhD students get along with each other and learn from each other because that's an important part of the overall
Yeah.
process. And if we bring in people who we think are going um, to be negative influences on the rest of our students,
Mm-hmm.
that's I think probably the biggest avoidable issue. The other is just to make sure that someone checks your personal statement for things like grammar and flow and things like that. If people read a personal statement and feel like this is someone who's not going to be able to write well, that's also a problem. And it doesn't mean that we are expecting everyone to be perfect writers, but we also feel like a personal statement is something that people have the opportunity to vet, right? I mean, you have the chance to take this to colleagues. You have the chance to send this through grammar checking software,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And if you don't do that, people will feel like this is going to be someone that's going to be really hard to mentor through the entire process of writing a dissertation because um, it's a lot of writing that people have to do. Um, and and of course make sure that your letter writers actually are going to be positive. We
Mm-hmm.
recognize that some people are better at writing letters than others, and so I'm not expecting perfectly written, glowing, like so wonderful sorts of letters from everyone. But if a letter writer says something that's negative, that becomes a red flag,
Okay.
because you think uh, this person had the opportunity to find anyone they wanted to write a letter for them, and they found someone who actually said something that made me concerned about what they were going to be able to bring to the class. So as you ask your letter writers to make sure that they're going to actually be able to write you positive letters.
Okay. So, in terms of getting recommendation letters, you are not really looking at, uh, the one that uses, the most fancy words and exaggerate things. However, if you have a negative recommendation, it becomes a red flag. So I know, like you said, you don't assign points to each of the application processes. But what role do you think recommendation letters play in the evaluation process? And what qualities are admission committees looking out for in recommendation letters?
Yeah, so I think different people weight recommendation letters differently, and weight who writes those letters differently as well. Certainly, if there's a letter from someone that institution knows well, um, that that plays a little bit more, I think, in the thinking, because if I know Dr. So and so who is saying this person is absolutely outstanding, um, that I think matters a lot. And I think that there are um, I mean, I could give tips to letter writers, right? That it's it's helpful to say that this person is in the top X% of uh, people that you have advised or
Mm-hmm.
potential applicants. It's helpful to say I'm comparing this against this very exceptional pool of applicants. It's helpful to describe exactly uh, what's positive about a given applicant, but I don't um, I don't ding applicants very much for for the fact that their letter writers might be busy or might not be good at writing recommendation letters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that the key is that the overall tenor of the recommendation letters needs to be a positive one. You need to see that this person actually cares about the applicant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Meaning, if it's a paragraph long, I'm like, oh, that's probably not the greatest letter, because they probably don't care enough to write a longer letter.
A longer letter.
um, if all of the letters come from people like that you took a single class with many years ago, as when I know that there are people that you've worked more closely with recently,
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a bit of a red flag. And it also becomes a red flag if I can see that the letters all have the same language. In other words, I know that the applicant wrote that letter for all of their different letter writers, and those
Yeah.
letter writers didn't take the time to modify that language at all. I think we all recognize that some advisors, mentors will put their advisees in the position of having to write or draft those letters.
Yes.
And I don't hold that against applicants. But if applicants write the same letter for all of their letter writers, and their letter writers don't have the aren't connected closely enough with their applicants to actually modify that to where I see like paragraphs that are exactly the same, that bothers me too.
Okay. Okay. So, in other words, don't use the same recommendation letters for all your recommenders in case they request that you draft something for them. And also, it's important for them to at least speak positively about you, and not come across as if they were forced to write you a recommendation letter. So in terms of uh, research experience and academic background, which one do you think would weigh higher?
So again, this will differ by institution. um, I think that at Hopkins, we tend to value experience, and not even research experience, but experience in the field of public health
Mm-hmm.
very highly. So I think we see ourselves and we see our strength as being training people who will go out and actually make a difference in the field of public health, as opposed to people who are going to um, kind of advance like the science of epidemiology, but in an esoteric way that's not actually going to be applicable to the practice of public health. And
Okay.
so we in our institution therefore look for people who have experience in the field of public health more broadly. So if you've spent time in a public health department or with a ministry of health or doing public health research, I think that those are seen very positively, and I think can absolutely make up for an academic background that was less than stellar, right? But there are other institutions who really see themselves as their strength being training those academics, and and I think who would say we would prefer to have a student who who has a 4.0 and looks like they are the most exceptional person in terms of their intellectual capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't have a strong background and experience. I think the key is to, as you're putting your application together, to be yourself, right? There are some people who have a stronger practice or research based experience. There are others who have a stronger academic experience. Um, be honest about that. Be honest about who you are, what your strengths are that you bring to the table, and recognize that some institutions will say that is exactly the right thing for us. Others will say that's not what we're interested in. But but you don't have to get accepted to every institution, right? You have to get accepted to the ones that are going to be right for you, and hopefully that sort of approach will play well, and you will get those acceptances from the institutions that are the best fits for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's so I mean, from what I've gathered from this conversation, it means that if, for example, you've done your masters and then you've gone back to the field to practice, applying to a PhD program wouldn't be you wouldn't be at the disadvantage, because yesterday I had this conversation with someone, and he was worried that if he takes a break from he takes a break after his master's program to go and work, probably he might be at a disadvantage when he's applying for a PhD program.
At Hopkins, for certain, you would not be at a disadvantage, and in fact, I think you would be in an advantage as long as what you were taking a break to do had something to do with public health, right?
Mm-hmm,
So if
mm-hmm,
you got your master's degree and then decided to go work for 2 or 3 years in a department of public health, right? I think we would be very excited about that. If if you got your master's degree and then decided to go work for 2 or 3 years as an investment banker, um, we would have to see a story of why like that is a trajectory towards public health, right?
mm-hmm,
And maybe you're particularly interested in the economics of health, and over the course of your years as an investment banker, you kind of migrated more and more toward the health sector or something like that. That could be a reasonable story, but
mm-hmm.
just going to work to make money um, probably is not going to sell.
Okay, so remember that whatever, if you're taking a break, then whatever you're doing should be in essence related to public health. You should be able to justify it. Uh,
Yeah, or there
mm-hmm,
should be a story. You should
mm-hmm,
be able to tell a narrative about how you got to where you are, and why that is like demonstrating your commitment to the field of public health. We don't want to train people who are going to leave our institution and go into, again, if we're talking about, I'm going to pick on the financial sector, right? It doesn't have to be that you are going to be a professor of public health. You can be, you can say, I want to be an epidemiologist at the Department of Public Health. I want to work for a nonprofit. I want to work
mm-hmm.
for the WHO. I want to work for the pharmaceutical industry. Those are all like very reasonable
Yeah.
paths, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can't say I want to take this PhD and take one of the few PhD slots that we're providing, and I want to then go you know drill for oil in Alaska or something. Again, it just has to be
Yes. Yeah.
something related to the field more broadly.
Yeah. I think it's well understood. th- so going back to crafting, telling your story. N- oh, how important is applicants' statement of purpose, and what are some of the things that admissions committee are looking out for in a well crafted statement of purpose?
Yeah, so again, I will say I think different reviewers weight the statement of purpose differently. For me, if you have what I would call kind of a traditional path, in other words, you did your undergraduate, you did a master's in public health, you went and worked for a year or two in a public health related field or public health research field, and now you're applying for a PhD. The statement of purpose to me is not that critical because I can see your path, and I mostly just want to get a sense of what what topic area you're interested in. If your path is what I would say more non-traditional, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have a degree in economics, right? And or you worked for a few years in the international development sector or something like that. Um, I'm wanting to see why a degree in epidemiology, if we're talking about my department, I want to see why that is the right degree for you. And I want to hear how you got to this point and what makes you unique. And in those cases, I mean, those can be some of our strongest applicants, but it really does hinge on that statement of purpose because I have to
Okay.
know why you're applying to our program. And if you can give a good, compelling story of
Mm-hmm.
why you're going to be that unique applicant that is different from everyone else and going to become. I mean, we want to train like the next set of leaders in public health broadly, and
Mm-hmm.
if you can show how you're going to be that person, then that can make a big difference and get a lot of support, right? So I think that it depends on something of your background, and if it's a more traditional background, you we know who you are, and we probably are going to be evaluating your application based on kind of general potential, fit with the department,
Mm-hmm.
diversity across the class. If you're coming from a different sort of background, we want to know why you're coming to Epi, what you're trying to get out of this degree. And that can really make the difference between making you one of the absolute strongest applicants because
Mm-hmm.
you're very different
Yeah.
versus one of the weaker ones because we feel like this is just not the right degree for you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that insightful perspective. Have so many questions coming in from LinkedIn. We have almost 50 watching live on LinkedIn. We have a couple on YouTube and others on Facebook. Would uh, discuss two or more questions, and then would start taking questions from the audience. Um, so for the interview process, how critical is the interview process in the decision making?
So, um, again, this varies a lot. I would say that at at Hopkins, um, the interview process is an important one, but from a certain perspective. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, we are not generally able to give like extra little interview points. In other words, this person had a fantastic interview. This person had a good but not great interview, and so therefore we're going to go with the fantastic. That doesn't happen very much, but it is really important that in your interview you be composed, you be comfortable, you can answer the kind of straightforward questions with reasonable responses. You don't
Mm-hmm.
seem too rehearsed, right? Um, and so it's possible to have a bad interview that can really negatively affect
Affect
your
you. Mm-hmm.
but we're not among those who interview well. We're not trying to parse like this was the best interview and this was the
Okay.
like you know so that's kind of what I would say is we're wanting to make sure that that this person would again we're really looking more for um, that you are taking the position seriously, right? So that you've thought about this and that you would be the kind of person that would contribute to the class. We recognize it's a stressful situation and people um, don't always perform the best under pressure, and we're not going to ding people too hard for that. But if you come in completely unprepared, or again like try too hard to like sell what an amazing student you are, right? That's the kind of thing that will turn me off
Mm-hmm.
a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Okay. Okay. Great. Um, in terms of, I know we've indirectly, you know, discussed this issue of sending emails to advisors prior to you applying. Would you, knowing that you sending an email to a professor wouldn't, in other ways, really affect whether you be admitted or not? Is it still recommended to reach out to a couple of faculty within the
So
school?
I would say that if there is a strong reason for you to be reaching out to a specific faculty member, yes, I would do so, and I would do so at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
which to me means like October-ish, right?
Okay.
So if someone reaches out to me and says, "I am interested in," um, you know, mechanistic modeling of tuberculosis or TB epidemiology in Uganda, I'm going to understand why they're coming to me because that's what I do,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to be very interested in like is this a good fit for me, right? And if they contact me in the summer, I'm going to be thinking, wow, they're like this is like too far in advance. I'm not even starting to think about PhD applications for next year. If they
Okay.
contact me in December, I'm thinking, well, it's almost like an afterthought. Like you weren't even thinking about this until you came right up against the deadline. So you want to. There's a sweet spot for when you
Okay.
should
Mm-hmm.
contact people, but also if I get a message from someone who is I'm interested in the infectious disease epidemiology program at Johns Hopkins. I'm always going to want to see someone's CV. So you should always send a copy of the CV.
Of your
But if
CV.
that CV is like they've been doing work in cholera or something, I mean, like, why are you contacting me? Like, we have other people who have uh, expertise in cholera. I'm not the person that you would be interested in working with. You're probably just contacting me because you went down a whole list of professors or something like that, and that's going to kind of turn me off. I mean, to be honest, I'm not going to remember that when it comes around to application season, so it's probably not going to hurt you very much. But just speaking as a faculty member who gets a lot of these, if I see people who are interested in the exact sort of thing that I'm doing to where I can see I'm one of the two or three faculty members that of course they would reach out to because our interests are really well aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people I want to hear from and I will be very interested to talk to. Others
Okay.
who are just like interested in the program as a whole, again, I'll feel like, well, there are lots of people. They probably emailed this to 20 people and they're just seeing who's going to respond. And that I'm less enthusiastic about.
Yeah. So it's very important to do your, like, your do your own research, do your due diligence before you reach out to someone. I think that is fair. Um, So in terms of waitlisting, how what would you say is the best strategy for an applicant who is on a wait list? How often do students get off the wait list, especially in top institutions?
So people do get off the wait list, um, but each institution has a sense generally of where people are on the wait list. They will, we don't want to create a wait list of so many people knowing that like 80% of the people on the wait list are not going to get in. Like we know year after year the range of who's going to accept and who's not, right? And so we know how long we need to make the wait list to make sure that we fill all our spots and not go any further than that, right?
Okay.
So that means that everyone on the wait list does like have a genuine chance. And it's also important to recognize that at the kind of top institutions, most people don't decline offers until the very last minute, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
we
mm-hmm.
don't get a lot of declines. We get acceptances within the first few days. We don't get a lot of declines until like the few days before the application deadline. So if you're on the wait list and you haven't heard until that time, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm,
If you have a particular compelling story of um, why you need to know where you are on the wait list. In other words, you're considering an offer from another institution. Um, if you if you don't hear from us um, like until like the last day or two, you're not going to be able to accept that offer because you're not going to be able to think through who your advisor
mm-hmm,
is going to
mm-hmm,
be, things like that. Um, and you can articulate that, right? Um, Often there are ways to figure out not exactly where you are on the wait list. You'll never get that information, right? But but you can get a sense, right? And
mm-hmm,
I often will uh, like when I interview people, I will tell them, uh, please reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. Like when I interview people, I'm not on the admissions committee, so I'll be like, I'm outside of the process. Like you can consider me kind of a safe person to ask, and I'm not going to feel like you're um, badgering me. And if there's a like if I can I mean, someone at Hopkins knows where you are on that wait list, right? And if I have um, that story, in other words, if someone were to come to me to say, "I'm really interested in this other program," I would really strongly consider Hopkins if I have enough time to figure out who my advisor would be and what that structure would look like.
mm-hmm.
I can go to someone and say, is this person high enough on the wait list for us um, to go through some of that effort or not, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
you know, I can't guarantee that they're going to give me an answer, but I can at least ask and inquire, and it doesn't hurt to make that known. But if it's just I'm feeling a little bit nervous and I want to know where I am on the wait list, you won't get that answer. You won't get that answer.
But it's still important to at least reach out to the program to maybe inquire about how things are going, even if you don't have like a specific question, or you don't have an alternate offer from another institution.
Yeah. I mean, like institutions, if they're not interested in you, would not put you on the wait list, right? I
Mm-hmm,
mean, I think of the wait list as being we're really interested in having you be part of our program. It's just that we only have a certain number of slots, and the slots are limited not by interest; they're limited by funding, right?
mm-hmm,
So it's not that we wouldn't in a perfect world have everyone on the wait list come and be a PhD student with us. It's just that our department doesn't have the money to make that happen. So it's not a suggestion that I mean the people we're not interested in, we're not going to admit, right? So like and it does, and I think that we therefore are um, always happy to hear from students who are like on the wait list and really interested. What what will generally not happen is that's not going to move you up or down the wait list, right?
Okay.
So we're not going to um, uh, change your position on the wait list just because you were more enthusiastic in reaching out or not. And the reason for this is that the wait list is is compiled by a large admissions committee, right?
Okay.
That we can only bring together one time because it like scheduling 30
Yes.
people or
Yes.
whatever is really hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not fair, like since we're not going to be able to bring all those people back to like reevaluate the wait list every 2 weeks or so, it wouldn't be fair for a student to be able to kind of nudge themselves up outside of that process
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
it would be due process for everyone to be considered fairly at the same time. And so it doesn't hurt to uh, express your enthusiasm and,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
and to do what you can to see what things would look like at that institution. But it's not going to change where you are on the wait list because that wouldn't be fair. Like we try really hard not to make our admissions decisions based just on one person's like experience with a student or something like that. We really
Mm-hmm.
do
Yeah.
want the admissions
Mm-hmm.
committee to give everyone a fair shake.
A fair share. Okay. So, but the bottom line is that every institution has an idea about the ranking of their wait list. I- I- They may not like
Yeah.
explicitly tell you your position, but in essence, they know like who gets in when the first rejection or when the first like decline of offer comes in.
Yeah, so in general, institutions will have. I mean, and I will say at Hopkins, it's not a like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's often like if we lose someone in the genetic epi track, this
Mm-hmm.
would be the person that we would slot in for them. If we lose
Okay.
someone in
Mm-hmm.
general epi, this is who we would slot in, etc. So there's but there is a hierarchy, and that hierarchy tends to be established at the same time as people decide who they're admitting, because again it's usually an admissions committee of people from across the department who make those decisions. It's hard to get all those people into one room, and so when they do get into a room they make the decisions about not only the admissions but also the wait list, and
The
then
wait
they can
list.
just give that wait list to the departmental administrators who can kind of check off when people decline who to go to.
Great, great, great. How about dealing with rejections? If you're an applicant and say you've applied to 10 schools and you've gotten rejections from all the schools, how do you deal with this situation?
Yeah, well, so what I will say is I have multiple stories of people in our department who were like flatly rejected one year, like sometimes not even getting an interview, and applied the next year and got in, right? And so just because you were turned down one year doesn't mean that you're not going to be competitive the next year. Um, I would say if you have someone who is um, uh, that in a given department, like I'm not going to do this for like a random applicant, but if there's someone that I know, right, I could look at that application and say, my sense is that this is something that like this is an application that is broadly competitive or broadly not. And if it's broadly not competitive, is there something that can be done to fix that? In other words, like if you were to go and work for a couple of years or maybe publish a couple of papers, would that move it into the kind of competitive pile
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm,
not?
yeah.
Right? Um, but it's, I think, again, like what happens is you have this kind of upper tier of applications, 30, 40 applications, right? um, that in any given year might be competitive, and you just don't know who's going to be on the committee that's selecting, these are the people we're going to interview, these are the people who are not, right? Or you don't know who's going to stand up in that admissions committee meeting and say, this is the person that we really need to take because of X, Y, or Z, and who's not. And so there is an element of randomness to this, both from
Mm-hmm.
one institution to the next and from one year to the next. And so uh, if you have an application that is broadly competitive, or could be made just could be made competitive with just a couple of tweaks,
Mm-hmm.
you should do that and apply the next year. You can apply to the same places, right? But there are also some times where people's expectations probably need to be calibrated too. I mean, that you might not be competitive for certain programs, but you would be competitive in others. And to recognize that there are a lot of people out there who are making a big difference in the
Mm-hmm.
field
Yeah.
of public health, or
Mm-hmm.
anything else, who got their degrees from schools that people would not say are like necessarily the top institutions, but they're doing great work, and nobody ever asks. I mean, like, you think of anyone who is kind of a leader in the field, nobody's asking, where did you get your PhD from,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
asking, what have you done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there is absolutely the ability to get that PhD. I mean, often what you just need is a PhD, right? And so you get that PhD from anywhere, and you can go with that, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't, um, like, you don't have to get a PhD from the kind of top tier institutions of the
Yeah.
world to make a big difference,
Yeah. That makes absolute sense. Last question from me. AI and public health education. Where do we go from here? I know there was a guideline, AI guideline from one top institution that actually is encouraging students to get into using AI, familiarizing themselves with AI, but also recognizing that they can be mistakes, or they can be uh, incorrect response. So your ability to decipher which one is correct and which one is incorrect is up to you. But they are not saying no one should use it. How is Hopkins going to, uh, you know, position themselves in this
Yeah,
scenario?
well, I mean, I think that this is true at Hopkins, and I'm sure at most other institutions, is that there's broad heterogeneity in how our faculty are kind of perceiving this. But but the reality is this technology is going to continue to
Mm-hmm.
advance,
Yeah.
and we will have to adapt to it. And hopefully, by adapting, we mean actually using it as part of the
Yeah.
educational experience. There's
Mm-hmm.
no reason that we shouldn't embrace new technologies and think about how we can harness them for good. And so I think that we're going to have to, we've already started some of these discussions, but we're going to have to think about how do we make use of AI in our educational system, to where recognizing this is something that students will have access to, should have access to.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of
Yeah.
what we're all going to have. And how can we then use that to take away a component of the process that can be automated, right? And then train students to use that well, and to direct it in a way that can make better products. I've heard AI compared to like calculators, right?
Mm-hmm.
That when calculators first came out, um, that that people were concerned, like, students are no longer gonna like know how to add numbers or multiply numbers in the back of their heads or whatever. And it's true, like people don't know their like times tables as well in the back of their head, but we've gone beyond that, right? And now
Yes.
we
Yes.
can, like, who needs to know that, because we have all these, systems that again, I can just type it in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the same sort of thing. Like AI is going to be able to make certain things accessible that weren't before, and we should um, think about, therefore, what do we need to be training students in to make the most use of it, um, not just being scared of change. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, change is
Yeah.
a good thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I think we are almost ending. We'll take a couple of questions. I have one from uh, YouTube from Femi, who says, very insightful, enlightening. Can applicants apply to the PhD program while still in the second year of their MPH program?
So the answer to that is yes, of course. If you're going to have graduated by the time you will have a PhD, you can absolutely apply. And we have people who apply in the second year of their master's programs all the time. Again, at Hopkins, we place a high value on experience, and so um, if you have done nothing except undergraduate directly to MPH, and you're now applying to a PhD, at Hopkins, that would probably be not, unless you have been exceptional, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a tough application to get through. But if you did undergraduate, worked in public health for a couple of years, then did your master's, then absolutely applying from your master's into your PhD would be very competitive, you know? So,
Okay.
but yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you so much. From LinkedIn, there's a question from Chibuki, who says, good morning, Professor Dodi and Banda. Please, can I apply for a direct PhD with my bachelor's degree in public health and 2 year experience in the field? I must say, I haven't, so far, haven't come across anybody with bachelor's at Hopkins. How like easy it is for someone with just a bachelor's to get in?
So again, you can apply. We will consider that application. A master's is not a prerequisite for a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I will say, unless you are absolutely exceptional, uh, it would be difficult to be competitive. I mean, I think 20 years ago, we used to take a lot more direct bachelor's to PhD. I think it's become kind of the standard now that we expect a master's. Um, we do take very occasional PhD students who have only a bachelor's. These tend to be students from other fields,
Mm-hmm.
um, who are just, again, just absolute superstars, right? So like, say someone is in, like, I don't know, the field of physics. I'm just coming up with something, right? And they've got a great story for why they were a physicist, and now they really think that they can apply this to the particular key problem in public health. Like, why would they need a master's in physics, and why do we want to hold them back? Like, so there can be very exceptional cases, but it's very rare.
Okay. There's a question from Opeyemi Andrew on LinkedIn. He says, I'm rounding off my MPH program in the UK. Do I need to get it done before I can apply for a PhD program? Or I can apply whilst waiting to fulfill my requirements?
So, as long as it is clear that you will have finished your master's by the time you're starting your PhD, you can apply. We won't take people into a PhD program who are in the middle of a master's,
Mm-hmm.
but if you are currently in the middle of a master's, but you will have finished by the time that you would be starting the PhD program, then yes, absolutely, you can apply.
Okay. So someone says, Terefeketo, um, says, thank you, Professor Dowdy, for being with us. What are the criteria for the epidemiology departments looking for in PhD applications? I think the actual question is, do someone whose background in nursing, for example, has the same chance to be selected as someone whose background is an MD?
So I think yes. I don't think that we would say that we would prioritize people with medical training over nursing training, and many times, uh, we take people with uh, non-clinical backgrounds as well. Um, in fact, I would say most of our PhD students are
Yeah.
non-clinical. If you're talking about masters and an MPH, I mean, I think a lot of what I've been discussing here has been kind of with our PhD students in mind. So our master's students are generally not interviewed, and generally just reviewed from the perspective of, will this person succeed in our program or not? And if it's yes, we admit. If it's no, we decline. There's no wait list. Um, and But our acceptance rates are much higher, because I mean, obviously more people will succeed than we can admit to a PhD program. So for master's programs, the bar is much lower, and I would say nursing background, medical background, non-clinical background, yeah, we would encourage everyone to apply.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we've answered most of the questions during our discussion. So if you join us late, please try and rewatch the conversation. Most of the other comments are just thanking you, Professor Dodi, for making the time to join us today. So I think that we would likely end here. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, so we are very excited that you were able to join us today. Before you go, any final words for our viewers?
No, I mean, thanks so much for having me, and I think that I would encourage those of you who are interested in a career in public health to apply and get more education. Do what it takes to fulfill your dreams. I think that we in the academic world of public health, this is what we want to do. We want to do what we can to help get people to where you want to go, and making the difference you want to make in the world. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye bye.
Thanks, you too.
So there you have it. I must say this has been one of the most detailed conversations that I've had. Giving you all the intricacies of the PhD application process, the details of exactly what the admissions committee is looking out for, and all that. So hopefully you got a chance to listen in. And also, if you haven't, if you were busy or because of the time you couldn't join us, this video will be available on our YouTube channel, Dr. Banda Khalifa. So if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so. Well, it's Friday, so enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a blessed day. Bye bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cornelius Nomeshi. I'm a medical doctor from Ghana. I completed my MPA degree at the Harvard TH